So we have a new lesson that is after Blenheim. So if you see after Blenheim, it is an anti-war poem written by poet Robert Southey. Actually, the poem describes the losses and after effects of an epic war which was fought in 1704 for the Spanish succession in Blenheim. That Blenheim is in South Germany. Now, Blenheim is the English name for the German village Blindheim, okay, situated on the left bank of the Danube River in Bavaria in South Germany. The overwhelming Allied victory ensured the safety of Vienna from the Franco-Bavarian army. Thus, it prevented the collapse of the Grand Alliance. The poem was written in 1796 sharply. Um, it is criticizing the destruction and death caused by war. It is set at the site of the Battle of Blenheim with the questions of two small children. They are Peterkin and Wilhelmine. So these are the grandchildren of the old man who is telling the story. His name is Casper. So their grandfather, the old Casper, tells them of burned homes, civilian casualties, and rotting corpses, the dead bodies, while repeatedly calling the war as a famous victory. That is the ironical situation caused by Robert Southey all through the poem. So you will hear the repeated usage of the term it was a famous victory. Now, the poem depicts the common man's ignorance about the motive of war. Actually, the common people are unaware of the destruction caused during the wartime. Now, whenever a war is fought, what happens? It brings a lot of destruction and death along with it. Apart from the loss of life, people also lose their homes and all what they have, and they will have to start anew. They have to start again their life. Now, victory cannot compensate for such losses, although the people succeed in war, but whatever the losses, the death of people and the homes, it will never return back to them. Thus, here the poet has used a simple narrative of a grandfather explaining to his two grandchildren his own suffering and the suffering of many other people who were the victims of battle. Now, the grandfather, the old Casper, keeps on quoting that it was a great victory, but is unable to justify the gain of the war to mankind. And people always think about the victory, but they fail to realize the loss that mankind faces because of such battles. Wars are actually very evil. It costs lives that are very precious. And we need to find solution to solve conflicts without it costing any life. Only then everyone will be at peace. Now, here what happens? The poem begins like this. Okay, have you all got the text with you? Take page number 17 of your treasure trove. Okay, so the poem goes like this. It was a summer evening. Old Casper's work was done, and he, before his cottage door, was sitting in the sun, and by him, spotted on the green, his little grandchild Wilhelmine. So now what is happening? It was on one summer evening. It all happened. An old Casper, the old man, where is he sitting? He is sitting in front of his house after finishing his daily chorus. He was carefully observing his grandchildren. They are Peterkin and Wilhelmine. The boy's name is Peterkin and the girl's name is Wilhelmine. Now, the grandfather is carefully observing how his grandchildren are playing near the rivulet in front of him. Now, what happens? Wilhelmine, the girl, saw that Peterkin, her brother, had found something smooth and round that looked like a ball near the rivulet. That happens in the second one, isn't it? In the second stanza, we have, she saw her brother Peterkin roll something large and round, which he beside the rivulet in playing there had found. He came to ask what he had found that was so large and smooth and round. So the beautiful description about the thing that Peterkin has found, and we come to know it was nothing but a skull. So the boy who found the skull near the rivulet, yes, Peter Kin found a skull and he did not know it was a skull. So he only knew, he sighs and explains that it was smooth and it is a large thing, it is a round thing. And actually, we all know it is a skull of some fellow who died in the battle that was fought on this last years ago. So the battle was fought on this land years ago. He also quoted that this fellow had sacrificed his life for a great victory. Now, this grandfather, in the coming lines, we know the grandfather explains to him what this smooth, large, round thing is. And in the third stanza, we know it is old Casper took it from the boy who stood expectant by. Expectant by means he is waiting an answer from his grandfather. And then the old man shook his head. Shook his head means he started waving his head, or he shook his head in some kind of reluctant to explain. Why? Because he realizes that it is the skull of some soldiers or some victims of the war that had taken place in the same land years ago. And with a natural sigh, when anything disastrous thing come into our mind, what happens? We sigh, isn't it? Expressing our deep distress over what is happening. So the poor man made a natural sigh and told, what did he say? It's some poor fellow's skull. What did he say to his grandchildren? It is some poor fellow's skull, said he, who fell in the great victory. So, in a short way, he said, this is the skull of either a victim or a soldier who was victimized during the war that had taken place years ago. And then he is continuously telling that, he goes on telling, I find them in the garden, for there's many hereabout. And often when I go to plough, the ploughshare turns them out. So he, with a great sigh, is explaining what happens. Whenever he goes to plough his garden, he used to find them because there are many skulls. So these are all speaking about the consequence of the war in a lighter way. Now, for old Casper, this is nothing new. He used to find them whenever he used to plow the land. He used to find them in the garden. There are many. He says it's not one or two. There are many skulls here and there. Especially when he goes for plowing, the plowshare used to turn it out. Plowshare is the cutting edge of a plow, the blade, okay. And then he says, for many thousand men, said he, were slain in that great victory. Without any exaggeration, he says, many people lost their lives in that great victory. So in a very light way, what is the grandfather explaining? He states that he has been finding many such remnants in the garden or in the field during ploughing. There were a great number of people who fought in this battle and many were killed. Now, what happens after hearing all these facts? What happens with Peterkin? Now, Peterkin is asking to his grandfather, now tell us what it was all about. Young Peterkin, he cries, and little Wilhelmine looks up with wonder waiting eyes. Now tell us all about the war and what they fought each other for. So the children are like, they are so very curious to hear from their grandfather what is the reason for the battle. And they wanted to know everything about the battle. Wilhelmine especially was also very curious. She looked at her grandfather, waiting for an answer in anticipation. See the line, with wonder waiting eyes. Beautiful alliteration, children. With wonder waiting eyes means expecting to see or hear some exciting thing. Now, see the way he has used the alliteration, not only in with wonder waiting eyes. Now tell us, 'twas all about, repetition of T sound. And then, and what they fought each other for. The children wondered. They are curious to know the purpose of the war. Coming down, Caspar is explaining to the children who and how the war was fought. It was the English, Caspar cried, who put the French to rout. But what they fought each other for, I could not well make out. But everybody said, quoth he, that it was a famous victory. Now Caspar is telling in reply to the children's curious question. Caspar replied that the war was fought between whom? The English and the French. The English defeated the French. In the war, who defeated? The English defeated the French. However, on being asked about the reason about the war, has he anything to say? He could not answer. So he did not know for what the war was fought, but he quoted that it was a great victory. Okay. Now, he is telling about his own personal experience about the war in the coming narration. How he is telling, my father lived at Blenheim then. So, Caspar's father was also living in Blenheim during the time of war. My father lived at Blenheim then. Yon little stream hard by. Yon means over there, beyond the little stream, very near to the stream they were living. They burnt his dwelling to the ground, and he was forced to fly. He was forced to fly means he was forced to run away from that place. So with his wife and child he fled, nor had he where to rest his head. So what happened? Not only he with his wife had to run away from Blenheim. So, in continuation to the narration, old Caspar also told his grandchildren that his own father lived at Blenheim, and the soldiers burnt his father's house, and he was forced to leave the place. Not only he, but his wife and child. Who is the child? Caspar. As a result of the war, he became homeless. So it is not only the story of the people around, but his own story. Caspar narrates to his children, telling that he was also part of this victimization of the war. Now in the coming line we have, with fire and sword the country round was wasted far and wide. So what is he telling? The fire of evil along with the swords destroyed everything. Okay, the country round, the whole country was destroyed by the evil of the war, not only with the sword but with the fire. And then the war was very terrible according to him, and many a chiding mother, then chiding mother means the pregnant women, and newborn baby died. Not only the pregnant woman but the small children, the newborn babies were also died. But things like that, must be at every famous victory. This is an ironical statement by Caspar, who repeatedly tells it was a famous victory. So he says, and all these things are very normal with any kind of war. These kinds of destruction surely and certainly happens with a war. So he does not consider as an awkward thing, that is an unusual thing. So he says this is a very usual thing with every war. It was for him not so very shocking news. So in every war, if a battle is won, many have sacrificed their lives. And he continuously says, it continues like this. They say it was a shocking sight after the field was won. So the report, they means here the reporters, they said that it was a shocking sight, but the war was won. For many thousand bodies here lay rotting in the sun. So in the field around, people saw thousands of bodies, thousands of dead bodies rotting in the field, rotting in the sun. But things like that, must be after a famous war. So he repeatedly says this ironical statement, that is, things like that, must be after a famous war. So Caspar does not create a kind of what is that, anxiety and the fear, the pain of this war is not being expressed by Caspar. He ironically states each time such things take place at every battle that has a great victory. And he says the reporters already made the comments that it was a shocking sight where lots of bodies were rotting under the sun. And these bodies belonged to the men who were killed in the battle. And this battle was won because of these people who sacrificed their life. And Caspar mentions that such things are very common with every victory of war. Now, finally he says, great praise the Duke of Marlborough won, and our good Prince Eugene. Why, it was a very wicked thing, said little Min. Nay, 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 my little girl, quoth he, it was a famous victory. So now who takes control over this narration? Wilhelmine says it was a wicked thing. She is really the speaker for the destruction of war. It is through these children the poet is trying to educate the people or give information to the people that the wars are very destructive. Now, as here we come to know the English had won the war, and their army was led by whom? Led by whom, children? Duke of Marlborough and Prince Eugene. And the commanders were greatly praised for their victory. However, the little child, the young girl, she is telling it was a wicked thing. And soon the grandfather corrects us, telling, no, it was a famous victory. And the poem ends with old Caspar mentioning that everybody praised the Duke. How is it ending? And everybody praised the Duke, who this great fight did win. But what good came of it at last? Quoth little Peterkin. Again the poor boy Peterkin asked, what good came out of the war? The children are still not convinced of whatever their grandfather said. So he says, what good came out of this war? And how can you say it's a famous victory? And to this the old grandfather says, why, that I cannot tell. He says, I cannot tell the reason for why we say it was a great victory. But he continues in his statement, he says it was a famous victory. So old Caspar said that he could not answer this question, as he did not know the answer at all. But he could just say that it was a famous victory. So the children are always very curious why this grandfather repeatedly says the war was a famous victory. We also find in this the theme of man's cruelty towards man. Man kills another man to achieve victory, and the poor civilians are unaware. The ordinary people are unaware of the destruction being caused by war. They are only repeating whatever the reporters said, that it is a great victory. And Casper is unquestioningly accept the loss of innocent lives in the war. He says it all happens. It's a usual thing in great war that people lose their life. So these are some of the contradictory thing, the ironical things being expressed by Robert Southey. And the last paragraph leaves the question to the reader about the ruthlessness of war. No motives, objectives, or reason can justify the loss of life. And innocent children are able to understand this, but sensible men still fight battles in order to resolve conflicts. This is a harsh reality of the world. So, this is all about the poem. So, children, please go through the poem, try to understand it. And if you see, look at the rhyme scheme, children. If you look at the first line, okay, it was summer evening, old Casper's work was done, and he before his cottage door was sitting in the sun, okay, and by him spotted on the green his little child Wilhelmine. So what is the green and Wilhelmine? Okay, is repeated. Otherwise, it is A B C B D D. Okay, the rhyme scheme of the poem is A B C B D D. And here, the other things, if just to go through the poem, and if you try to find some of the rhyme, the rhetoricals used, few of the alliterations I have already mentioned to you. So read through the poem. If any doubt, please let me know. Okay, so all the best, dear students. Thank you.